curves in the curves, small curves and the large curves. And you can walk the labyrinth a few steps and then step into one of the small curves and rest there. You can walk a few more steps and rest there again. I've seen people walk the labyrinth using prayer beads and to stop at each new prayer as they were going. So there are a bunch of different ways to do it. And my experience is that once you've done it, you want to do it again. When we walk the labyrinth at Union Presbyterian Church, we ask people to walk it in stocking feet, or if they need their shoes because of balance issues, we have these little kind of paper booties they can put on over their shoes to keep the labyrinth clean. When people walk the labyrinth, they're walking something that represents their life journey in one way or another. And sometimes that's an incredibly encouraging thing. Sometimes that's something that makes us a little worried and maybe we're afraid to step out. But everyone that I've ever talked to that has tried it has come away with a sense of that it's a gift and that there's more to it than they had realized.
So this Lent, which begins sometime in March.
March 1st,
and it ends in February. You're going to be using this at your church as a spiritual discipline.
Yes, we're going to be using it during the month of March specifically, and we'll have information on our website about that. One of the things that's interesting to know about the labyrinth is how ancient it is. The basic design of the labyrinth we have was found as early as 3,500 years ago. It's been found on every continent. The basic design of the Chartres labyrinth was found in ancient Native American cave scratching drawing. So there seems to be a universal human impulse to ponder this winding path that we are all on. And it seems to be something, it's certainly become more popular, I guess is maybe one word to use for it, but people have been thinking about it, noticing it, trying it a lot more for the last 30 years, I would say. There was a renewal, really, that came around about the labyrinth. But the labyrinth at Chartres was built out of honey-colored limestone in the 1200s. So it's certainly an ancient practice, and that labyrinth is still in use.
And it's so interesting to me how the labyrinth mirrors life.
Yes.
So we always feel, and you know, I don't want to go back to the maze idea or get labyrinths confused with mazes, but ultimately, you know, in some ways, the dead ends or the place, depending on how you look at it, is it a dead end or a place of rest?
Oh, I like that a lot.
I'm thinking about where those little spots are where you can stop on the labyrinth, and you know the way that we approach dead ends is usually through anxiety. But if we stop there and stay in the middle of it, we might be able to hear something new or something different in that than our anxiety, right?
I love that. So when you set out on the labyrinth, you were about 12 feet from the center, and that's where you're going. And you start walking towards it, but then immediately the path curves away. So you see your goal, it's over there, but you realize that for a while you have to walk what feels like away from it. You feel like you're walking away from it, but the path keeps going, you know? And it takes you around and tantalizingly close to it and then away from it again. It's an amazing experience. And it is so much like life, you know? You can look at life in a couple of ways. You can say, well, how did I ever get here from there? Or you can say, everything I ever did, of course, inevitably led me here. And I think both are true.
Yeah,
both are true.
And if you're looking at it like as a youth, you walk in, when I'm thinking about where I wanted my life to head when I was a youth. The turn is further out.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you're looking at where you want to go, but you're thinking, well, how does this job at Safeway, or how does this job at Kroger, how is it going to get me to where I want to go?
Right.
And you're sitting there looking at it going, it looks so far away, but yet there might be a curve there.
Yes.
That, the next bend of life will bring you a little bit closer, and then you can see how the labyrinth kind of enters into that as as we get older, we come from God, we go to God. It's like those kinds of things. And if you follow the labyrinth for all of your life, there may be a moment when God seems more close than others.
I think that is true. I think that is true. I think about my own life, and I think about myself as a 17-year-old going off to college as a pre-med, because I'm sure that that's what I'm going to do with my life. And 3 years of pre-med disabused me of that notion and helped me to understand that my strengths lay in things like philosophy and theology, and I ended up as a philosophy major, which, that and
it's not very lucrative.
That and a buck will get you some fries at McDonald's, right?
Right.
So, what does that mean? But my walking towards pre-med, my walking towards the idea I might be a doctor, is the thing that led me to a school that had a strong theology department and wonderful chaplains and wonderful worship services where I got to witness embodied prayer all the time. I mean, all these things connect up, until here I am so many years later, the pastor of a church that is trying to be faithful in many, many ways. And one of the ways we try to be faithful is by opening ourselves to different experiences in prayer, for our own enrichment, but also so that we can serve our community.
And how would the labyrinth lead you to that? How would a life of prayer kind of direct you to service?
Well, I think that churches are always faced with this question: who do we exist for? What is our purpose? What do we exist for? We certainly exist because Jesus calls us together, but we exist for one another, and we exist for the community. We exist to hear the word preached every Sunday, and Jesus stands up in the synagogue and says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for God has anointed me to bring good news to the poor and release to the captives and joy for those who are mourning." And we, as faithful people, if we're listening to what Jesus is actually saying, realize that he's calling us to go out. He's calling us to leave the doors of our church and to go out into the community and to follow him.
I really loved, when John Wesley, and I'll go back to, I guess, my roots there, but he talked about going into the fields, and he would preach the gospel to crowds there. He called it submitting myself to be most vile, because it took him away from the church. But in doing so, it was like a curve in the labyrinth. It was further. What he felt was further away, but it ultimately brought him back.
Absolutely. I think the labyrinth has that lesson for us, that we stay on the path.
And how would people get in contact with you and your church if they wanted more information on the labyrinth?
Sure. They could call the church at 748-9651, or they could come to our website, which is upcendicott.org, and I see that it's on the screen. And we will have information up about the labyrinth in Lent very shortly, so that folks will be able to know when it will be available, and we'll be able to get a little information on it, on exactly what it is.
Well, Pat, this has been an amazing conversation for us on prayer. I want to thank you for being on Encounter.
Oh, thank you.
And for being a part of this journey that we've been making through January, talking about New Year's resolutions and things that people might want to practice.
Wonderful.
So these are great. So thanks for being on, and Thank you, friends, for watching with us today.
Thank you.